Well, I just got back from seeing The Last Jedi, so here are my thoughts on it. And I'm probably going to wait around a week before I make this video public, just to give people a bit of time to, go see it for themselves and all that. But if you've not seen The Last Jedi and you care about spoilers, you're gonna want to stop watching this video now, because I'm gonna go big with spoilers. But if you want to know my spoiler-free opinion of the movie, it was relatively well produced, but bland, and with kind of plot holes and bad writing. Just like Force Awakens. I cannot see the point in it. There is nothing new, nothing interesting, it's a retread. Now though, spoilers everywhere. I'm not going to give a scene-by-scene playback of the movie, instead I'm going to tell you what I liked, what I thought worked, and then I will tell you what I thought didn't work, where it will probably become a bit rambly. So, starting with the good stuff. It was a well-produced movie, the special effects were good, the acting was fine for the most part, the music was used fairly effectively, the sets, the costumes, I don't have much in the way of complaints there. I enjoyed the opening space battle, that was actually one of my favourite parts, minus a few issues I'll get into later. I enjoyed the scenes wherein Kylo Ren and Rey were talking to each other through the Force. Their scenes were some of the best of the movie for me, even if the actual development there was a bit rushed, in that I found myself interested in what they represented and how they interacted. It is their story, after all, other characters are largely irrelevant at this point, but they keep bringing in new characters anyway. How about things improved upon since the last movie? It's been a while since I spoke about that, but some of my major complaints were the whole film feels like a rehash of A New Hope. There is nothing new, nothing exciting, just the same old stuff with different characters and better special effects. It felt like a Marvel movie to me, lacking in soul. Beyond that, I hated Rey's character. She was a complete Mary Sue. That isn't a question, or an argument, or an opinion, it's a fact. You might disagree with that fact, but you would be wrong. Every character immediately liked Rey, apart from Kylo Ren, the bad guy, and even he kind of liked her, in that he wanted to teach her. She had no obstacles to really overcome, and she was innately talented at things that made zero sense. She's a junker, okay, sure. I get that a junker would be able to repair a ship. Maybe even fly one, but probably not. Being able to repair a car isn't the same as being able to drive it really well. That's not quite how it works. So being able to fly at the level she was just didn't make sense. She lived in a hostile environment, so she's able to take care of herself. Trained herself to use a weapon. Sure, she uses a stick. I'm fine with that. But being able to immediately use a blaster and a lightsaber and tap into the Force the level she did? No, it was bad. But I remember most of the arguments that people pulled up. It was, wait for the next movie, they'll explain it. She's gonna be Luke's daughter, she's gonna be Obi-Wan's daughter, she's gonna be a living incarnation of the Force. They also said, well, Luke and Anakin were Mary Sues, or Gary Stu's too. Except they weren't. Luke's skills were piloting, as with Anakin. Whilst they probably should have given us a scene in A New Hope wherein Luke is shown piloting early on, before, he meets Obi-Wan, that's, a bit against the point. That was his established skill. He got trounced in every single fight he was in until the third movie in the trilogy. Nobody fell in love with him immediately, and Solo thought he was a naive kid, and even Leia seemed surprised at what a hick he was. Chewbacca almost tore his arm off, if I recall. He went through a journey, though. Anakin was the chosen one. Even then, he didn't pick up a lightsaber in episode 1 and bust a move all over Darth Maul. He was a kid, and he was a good pilot. Cut to 10 years later, he's been training for a decade, and nobody really liked him that much initially. Obi-Wan didn't like him at first. None of the Jedi did apart from Qui-Gon, who was kind of blinded by what he saw in the kid. Padme thought he was a weird kid, and then later on a creep, but eventually she grew to love him. Eventually, there was an arc. They didn't just start off and go, oh, Rey, you're so amazing, like they did in Force Awakens. So Rey was a Mary Sue, but do they address that in this movie? Do they improve upon it? Yes and no. There is a scene near the start which I feel is a direct response to the criticisms, wherein Snoke rants at Kylo Ren about how he got whooped by a girl who had never picked up a lightsaber before because he was out of balance, emotionally messed up.
I can feel your anger. It gives you focus, makes you stronger.
Kind of goes against every other movie there. See, when Anakin got emotionally messed up, his powers skyrocketed because he was feeding the dark side. Or rather, the dark side was feeding his emotions, which was feeding his power. Same with Luke. The closest example we would have is in the first movie, wherein Obi-Wan is quite clearly angry and begins to overpower Darth Maul after he killed Qui-Gon, before he's bamboozled thanks to losing his focus. So whilst I don't buy it as an excuse, I'm inclined to let it slide, because why not? Strong emotions and physical pain feed the dark side, but Kylo is fighting a constant draw to the light, so yeah, whatever, I'll let it slide. Rey's sooness is toned down a lot in this movie, which is a definite improvement, but at the same time, it's still there. She immediately is good at using a lightsaber when she gets to the island. She doesn't have any practice or training. She just picks it up and starts swinging it around like an expert, like an actor who's been doing wushu moves for like 12 hours straight. Okay. Turns out her parents were nobody special. The main reason she's so powerful is that she's a light side counterpart to Kylo Ren, and if you've been awake for like 24 hours or so, as I have right now, it's probably not the best thing to be trying to talking about Star Wars with all these weird words. If I sound tired, that's why, I apologise. But as Kylo Ren's dark powers grew, so did the light, so did Rey, because she was the counterpart to Kylo Ren. That is how Snoke puts it. I guess that makes sense. I don't think they've ever mentioned that in any of the other movies, that the light side and the dark side have to naturally balance each other. That was kind of the point of Anakin, he was going to bring balance to the Force, but I'll consider that matter dealt with, because they brought it up, in its self-contained story it makes sense. The other issue I had with it though, Force Awakens was a New Hope rehash, and this is an Empire rehash with bits of Return of the Jedi rehash. The overall plot is the weakest part of The Last Jedi. Things happen because, and there is no logic or sense to it. The basic idea is that the First Order are taking over the galaxy even though they've lost their super mega ultimate Death Star. How? Who cares? They blew up 3 planets, that's all you need to know. The Rebellion are on the ropes, and the entire movie is them trying to escape a big spaceship. Remember that part in Empire where they try to escape in the Millennium Falcon? Imagine that stretched into the plot of the entire movie. That as a whole isn't very interesting, and most of the subplots in the movie are complete nonsense. And the main plot has a huge plot hole. You have the First Order chasing the Rebellion. The Rebellion can't go into hyperspace because they will be tracked by the First Order. So they're just going in, like real space, because they're a little bit faster. They're just fast enough to keep out of range of the big gun and not be killed. Alright, sure. Why don't the First Order go into hyperspace and get ahead of them? Or why don't they call in other First Order ships somewhere in the galaxy and say, look, we're at coordinates blah blah blah, the rebels are like 5 feet in front of us, so just warp here with hyperspeed and you'll be in front of them and we'll hit them with a pincer attack. Apparently nobody thought to do that, so they spend something like 12 hours just driving after them, waiting for them to run out of fuel. It's a complete plot hole, and the entire movie revolves around this, so baffling that managed to slip through. As for subplots though, there's Luke, Rey and Kylo is one thing, then there's Poe, Leia and Holdo as another thing, and there's Finn, Rose and BB-8. Rose and Holdo are new characters who are kind of pointless to be honest. But yeah, those are the main threads of the story, and guess what? Finn's segment is utterly pointless. It doesn't impact the story in any way. On the one hand though, I feel bad criticising it, Because if that plotline wasn't in the film, we would have had even less going on despite the, 2.5 hour runtime. See, I remember being frustrated that Force Awakens didn't really show us anything interesting when it came to locales. We saw Tatooine with a new name, we saw Yavin 4 with a new name, and then a big snow Death Star. So getting to see the Casino City, Canto Bight I think it was called, getting to see the Casino City in Last Jedi was nice. It was a big part of Star Wars, the interesting planets and locations. So it's nice that we get to see an interesting, colourful location with a neat backstory and concept, even if the execution was really ham-fisted and poor. The actual reason they go there is stupid and ultimately means nothing. You can completely cut out that entire subplot from the film. Nothing is lost other than some brief characterization for Rose, a new character. So this whole thing exists to give her a tiny bit of characterization that could have been done anyway. Or you could have just not introduced a new character and focused on improving the characterization of the existing characters, like Poe and Finn, but whatever. I had nothing against Rose as a character, but they could have come up with a way better plot for her. It's absurd when you realise that she's fallen in love with Finn in a few hours, not even days. And Finn, he doesn't really get anything to do. There's no characterization or growth for him throughout the movie. I feel like they try to allude to it, but he doesn't arrive there naturally. He starts off the same way he was, and then at the end he's suddenly yes, I'm completely aligned with the rebels now. I feel sorry for Finn. His entire purpose was to be a red herring, to swing the lightsaber around in the trailers for Force Awakens and make people think he'd be the new Force user. But now that that cat's out of the bag, he's left with no purpose. And he almost has a nice moment near the end of the film, but that gets ruined. Speaking of which, how the hell did he drag Rose all the way back to the base after she crashed into him? They are both there in front of a huge number of enemies, and nothing happens, and the next time we see them, they're at the base. And on that same note, what was the point of the snow speeders that weren't snow speeders? What was the point in that as a scene? If you think about it, they went out there in those little spaceships to attack the big cannon, right? The mini Death Star cannon. But they don't succeed in that. They don't shoot down any enemies. Was that whole scene just so they could have a cool shot of the speeders driving along through the salt? I mean, yeah, I know, I'm very tired, but I'm trying to make sense of it. What was the point of that scene, other than to have a cool thing you can put on the posters and trailers? None, far as I can make out. But yeah, Finn drags Rose all the way back to the base. She passes out. Next time we see them, they're at the base, just after Luke got shot 99 billion times. Somehow that didn't hit them. He just drags her that distance, and everyone ignores him. As in, all the giant AT-AT things, AT-ATs. They'd see him walking off and they're like, just let him go. Let's talk about Leia for a moment. There is a scene in the movie where she is blown out into space and uses the Force to fly back in like Superman. I know what people are gonna say to any complaints regarding this. She's a Force user too, you just hate her because she's female. I thought I'd get that out of the way before I actually go into what's wrong with the scene, and guess what? The fact that she's female has nothing to do with it. I am 100% down with seeing Leia use the Force at last, but in this scene, laughable, unintentionally comedic and farcical. Let me ask you a question. What was the point of that scene? You see, movies are directed, created, they have a limited running time, and every scene has to tell the viewer something. Scenes exist to transfer information from the screen to your brain. What was the point of this scene? Was it A, to demonstrate Leia has the Force, B, give her something to do, C, to show Kylo's hesitation to kill her, or D, was it a red herring to make you think she's gonna die? If it's C, then you don't need to see her get blown up into space. If it's A or B, there are better ways to show it. just off the top of my very tired head, they could have had her using the Force to save people. What if, instead of getting sucked out into space and doing the Superman, she used the Force to stop other people getting blown into space? Like, as they're getting sucked out, maybe she could grab them with the Force. She could have stopped the torpedoes. She could have force-pulled those others on the bridge with her into safety. There are so many ways you could write that scene to demonstrate nicely what Rose says later on about not fighting to tear down, but to protect the ones they love. Instead, she just lets everyone get sucked out into space by Admiral Akbar, and then she does Superman, which was just a terrible scene all around. I guess maybe the argument is she could only tap into the Force power when her life was in danger, but that doesn't make any sense because her life would still be in danger if we did it the other way round. And now that I'm thinking about it, if the whole thing got blown up, and then she flew back in, when she got to the door, where she, entered the ship again, why didn't opening that door, suck everyone else out into space? Or, depressurize? What? And if that sounded bad, we're just getting started. That was a minor complaint. But Luke, I'm not sure where to begin. Character assassination is a good term to start with, though. Now, there are a few moments wherein we see Luke Skywalker in this movie, when he's walking around the Millennium Falcon talking to Chewbacca. But the majority of his scenes in the movie are not Luke Skywalker. Whoever wrote these scenes either hated Mark Hamill or never saw Star Wars. Let me give you the very basic rundown on Star Wars. It was the story of Anakin Skywalker, a man who falls and is redeemed through the love of his son. That's it at the end of the day. The other details are all incidental. Emperor Palpatine played a father figure to Anakin, but even though they had known each other for decades, it was Luke's love that touched him and redeemed him. Luke, who never gave up even though Darth Vader was a complete menace. In this movie, Luke senses the darkness in his nephew and he flips out, and after Kylo Ren waddles off and burns the temple down, Luke just goes, "Welp," and decides there's no point in doing anything ever again. So he runs away to die on an island where he never wants to be found. But he leaves a map with R2-D2 so that people can find him. Another plot hole. Why did he tell Rey he came to that island to die if he left a map that would guide people there? Did he only decide later that he wanted to die? Did he originally go there for a different reason? Okay, yeah, maybe he went there initially for a different reason, so he left a map. But then he decided, everything's goofy, I'm gonna off myself. They try to explain why Luke didn't attempt to save his best friend, Han Solo, by saying he cut himself off from the Force. That means he didn't sense anything that was going on. But that is a really stupid excuse. He cut himself off from the Force? How exactly? Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. Here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. But it's cool, bro. Just turn it off. Apparently you need to turn your brain off for this movie to start making sense. It just was not in Luke Skywalker's character to give up and turn his back on everything, and specifically his nephew, because of one failure. Imagine if that had happened in the original movies. I don't want to rescue Leia because I got beat up by the sand people. I got beat up by a guy in the cantina. And oh yeah, my aunt and uncle died and I couldn't save them. I don't want to go rescue my friends. Vader cut my hand off and I couldn't beat him. Sad face. So, good job. Mark Hamill's performance, by the way, was as good as it could be. I love the few moments wherein I feel he didn't have that much direction and was just free to play Luke as he saw fit. And just on a more personal, subjective perspective, what is the point in making a Star Wars sequel where we don't get to see how Luke has grown and used his green lightsaber. I think that's what most of us wanted. Really, we just, we wanted to see wise Jedi Master Luke with a green lightsaber. Because, it's cool. But whatever. Here is perhaps my biggest, the most egregious of complaints concerning The Last Jedi. Supreme Leader Snoke. What on earth? Who is he? Where did he come from? What does he want? What is his purpose? Guess what? None of that will ever be answered because he gets cut in half before any of that can become apparent. Honestly, if they bring him back to life, or make another movie or a novel or comic or whatever explaining all this, they can fuck right off if they think that'll make up for it. Here's the thing, Snoke is big evil man, and that is literally the only explanation we get for him. What did I just say? The only explanation we get for him. Like many of the characters, he has no motivation. Can you tell me what Snoke wants? No, you can't, because he literally has no motivation other than be big and evil. Where'd he get his power? Who is he? Was he Plagueis? Maybe he was, but they scrapped it after people figured it out. He's nothing. He sums up the new films in that sense. Speaking of motivation, what is Rey's motivation? Unclear. You could perhaps puzzle that out through mental gymnastics. See, Luke's motivation was always clear. Save Leia. Save his friends. Save his father. Anakin's motivation was clear and the reason he fell to the dark side. Save Padme. Rey's motivation? She wants her parents, but she also knows they are nobodies who just sold her, so maybe she wants to find her place or save those people she doesn't really know about. I mean, she spent 2 minutes talking to the rebellion. The only one she would really know is Finn. Whatever. And then we have Kylo Ren. Why is he evil? See, Luke sensed darkness in him, but where did it come from? Which other characters have fallen or been tempted by the dark side? Primarily Anakin and Luke. What caused Anakin's downfall? His strong love for Padme. As we all know, the dark side essentially stems from, or is born from, or powered by strong emotions, and love is the strongest of emotions. Anakin wanted to save her from dying. Palpatine manipulated those emotions. Likewise, Luke has reasons for the dark side flaring up in him, namely his protective urges towards his sister. But Kylo Ren? They never elaborate. They just say Snoke's goofing him.
That's not how the Force works.
And if they try and elaborate on that in the next movie, it will be poor retroactive storytelling at this point. Luke and Anakin had a reason to fall to the dark side. What was Kylo Ren's reason other than, Snoke is manipulating him, but manipulating him how? There is no direction, no goal, no aim with this franchise. Do you remember Rey's vision during Force Awakens? That meant nothing. It was just a cool looking sequence that served zero purpose, other than maybe they went, we can use some of these shots in the trailer to make people go, ooh, what's that? It was never explained. This isn't a trilogy with a clear goal in mind. They are making it up as they go along, and that really shows. You know what's funny? As bland as the Marvel movies are, I can't fault them for that. They had a plan, and the foreshadowing is done well. Instead, Star Wars has absorbed the terrible jokes from Marvel movies, the one thing I wish it didn't. These are kids' movies, so I don't care about the porgs or light-hearted moments. There was actually one funny joke in the movie with the giant, the iron, the steam press thing. I didn't think the porgs were cute or funny, really. The roasted one, the one that was being roasted, that scene was kind of funny. But, I understand their purpose. It's a kids movie, you need something cute and it needs to sell toys, blah blah blah. But starting the movie with quips, the holding for Hux moment, straight out of a Marvel movie, and what a cringe-inducing scene. Who thought that was a good idea? Luke comically dropping the lightsaber? If you watch the two scenes together, you know, end of Force Awakens, start of Last Jedi with those two scenes, you can tell that wasn't the original idea. They didn't film it and tell him, alright, you're gonna slam dunk it. The tone is completely off. These new movies have no point, and even within the movie there are many scenes that are utterly pointless. After Snoke is murdered, his action figure guards spring to life for an action scene with Rey and Kylo Ren. Why? Because we needed people swinging lightsabers. Not only was this a terrible action scene with pretty bad choreography, it was actually pointless. You might be thinking, action movies are cool? Hell yeah they are. I love action movies. I can watch John Wick and The Raid all day. But here's the thing, action scenes in action movies need to serve a purpose. What was the point of this scene? None. It's purely there so they can just fight each other. For starters, why the hell are they fighting after Snoke's already dead? These aren't friends fighting to avenge him, they're just random goons, presumably. Oh, I'm sure next year they'll release a novel or a movie explaining how they all had deep, diverse backstories and regarded Snoke as their mother or something. When you start sticking in pointless action scenes that can be deleted with no change to the plot, you make me roll my eyes. Seriously, imagine if Snoke was cut in half and then we immediately cut, to them scuffling over the lightsaber. Nothing is changed other than you cut like 2 minutes from the movie. Action scenes exist, like all scenes, to tell us something, to drive a point home. Having an action scene just cause you want to sell action figures of the Royal Praetorian Guards or whatever, that's really stupid. See, the action scene between Luke and Kylo served a purpose. I didn't really like it, but it had a reason for being. I wish I could say that for the rest of the movie. Oh, and before we end up, let's talk briefly about some more sort of problems, plot holes, inconsistencies that ruin my immersion. Luke is able to touch things as a Force ghost or a projection. Yoda is able to summon a lightning bolt. If these things are possible, why didn't Qui-Gon, the guy who first became a Force ghost, not do anything to stop Anakin falling to the dark side? You know, why didn't he just pop up at some point and slap Palpatine on the head? Did they not have that level of mastery yet? Okay. Then what about during the original trilogy? Why didn't Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi trip over the guy in the Death Star who was trying to blow up Alderaan? Maybe they still didn't have it, but they definitely had it during Force Awakens, so why didn't any of them prevent the goings-on at Starkiller Base? Or stop Luke and Kylo's Temple Showdown? We're dead, so we don't want to mess around with the living isn't an excuse when you're stopping the unnatural death of entire planets. You also can't use the logic that only Luke could physically interact with people because he was still alive, because he was still a Force ghost, and Yoda straight up summoned lightning. And even if you forget about that, Holdo, why didn't she tell Poe about the plans? Literally no reason not to other than we don't want to reveal that in the plot until later. Then she flies into a fleet at light speed and destroys it. What? Visually that scene looked amazing, but it made no sense. For starters, hyperspace is done along predetermined routes. It isn't just moving really fast or whatever. Hyperspace is like a different pocket dimension that can only be accessed at speeds greater than light speed. But whatever, that's probably extended universe stuff. I don't remember. So let's ignore that, and just assume that she's moving really fast. Why have they never done that before? Why didn't somebody say, hey, that Death Star is pretty fearsome, but let's just launch an unmanned X-Wing through it at light speed and destroy it? Why didn't they do that at Starkiller Base? Why aren't all the space battles just people launching things at light speed? Even if you argue it's a last resort, they definitely should have been doing that at Starkiller and the Death Star. Utter nonsense. They just wanted a scene that looked cool and damn the sense of it. Someone is gonna go, It's a movie with spaceships and laser swords, it's not meant to be realistic, bro. That's not the point. You have to follow the established rules of your own story, otherwise there's no point in having them. Or a story. I mean, I can come up with a reason right now, off the top of my head, for how they could have made that scene make sense. Right. First Order ships are slower, right? They could have said, if we take our shields down, we'll have extra energy that we can put to the engines to speed up. Same sort of logic that when you're in a car, if you have the radio and the heating on, it's going to be draining power away from the engine, right? Surely the thing that powers the shield, I mean, yeah, they have shield generators, but you turn the shield generators off, maybe you have more power for the speed, the main engines, you know? Or you could just say, we don't need our shields on anymore because there's one ship left. And just say, okay, our shields are down because we don't need them. And then she happens to take advantage of that by doing something that nobody would expect. But no, they didn't do that. And they're probably going to ignore it in the next film. Or go, oh no, the First Order have made a new thing that stops us from doing that. Oh wait, they have hyperspace jammers already in the other movies, I'm pretty sure. And then, what about, what's her name? Captain Phasma. Why do they keep what is the point? She's like a cool character, but they just throw her down holes constantly. What a waste. See, I don't want to hate this movie or Star Wars. I'm not going in looking for bad things, that's just how it is. Ultimately, these movies are not a man's artistic vision, flawed as it might be. It's the product of a committee. Every minute aspect tweaked to be as broad in appeal as possible. Every scene created, not to tell a story, but to sell a product. That's very sad to me. Star Wars is dead.